Lisa Carter stood at the kitchen window of their small farmhouse, watching her husband Jake tend to the vegetable garden in the morning sun. His movements were slow and careful as he checked each plant, pulling weeds with gentle hands that seemed to understand exactly what each growing thing needed. The blue skin of her face caught the light as she smiled, remembering how her mother had cried when she announced she was marrying a human. "You could have anyone," her mother had said in there. Native Zephyrian tongue, generals, diplomats, scientists? Why choose a farmer from some backwater human colony? Lisa had tried to explain that Jake made her feel peaceful in a way she had never experienced before. After years of tense diplomatic meetings and formal ceremonies on the Zephyrian homeworld, his quiet presence felt like coming home, but her family saw only disgrace in her choice. The morning routine on New Haven was always the same. Jake would wake before dawn, make coffee for both of them, and head outside to check the crops and the small repair shop he ran for their neighbors. Lisa would handle the communications from the colony's administrative center, where she worked part-time helping human settlers navigate trade agreements with other species. It was simple work, nothing like the complex negotiations she once handled between star systems, but it felt honest. "Morning, beautiful," Jake said as he came through the back door, dirt still clinging to his work boots. His brown hair was already damp with sweat despite the early hour. "The tomatoes are coming along real nice. Should have a good harvest this year." Lisa poured him a fresh cup of coffee, noting how he always said thank you, even for small things. In all their 2 years of marriage, she had never heard him raise his voice or speak harshly to anyone. The other colonists respected him, often bringing their broken equipment to his shop, but he never seemed to want attention or praise. "Commander Vex is coming today," Lisa said, watching Jake's face for any reaction. "He sent word yesterday. Something about border tensions with the Kralex Empire." Jake nodded slowly, the way he always did when processing information. "Been hearing rumors about that. Hope it's nothing serious." He sat down at their small wooden table, the same one he had built by hand when they first moved in together. "You worried about seeing him again?" Lisa considered the question. Vex had been her colleague for years, back when she held an important position in the Zephyrian military diplomatic corps. He had also been interested in more than just professional relationship, though she had never encouraged him. "Not worried, just wondering what he really wants." The morning passed quietly. Jake worked in his shop, fixing a harvester for the Mitchell family while Lisa reviewed trade reports. She could hear him humming softly as he worked, a human song she had learned to recognize, but never understood the words to. The sound always made her feel calm. When the transport ship landed at the colony's small spaceport, Lisa walked to meet it. Commander Vex emerged in full military dress, his blue skin a shade darker than hers, marking him as being from one of the more prestigious Zephyrian worlds. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his metals polished, and his bearing showed the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Lisa," he said, offering the traditional Zephyrian greeting gesture, "you look well. Simple life seems to agree with you." There was something in his tone that made Lisa straighten her shoulders. "It does. New Haven is a good place to build a life, indeed." Vex looked around at the modest buildings, the dusty streets, the humans going about their daily business. Very different from the capital, of course. "I imagine you missed the sophistication, the culture, the important work." Lisa led him toward the administrative center, where they would meet with Colony Director Peterson and other officials. "I found a different kind of important work here." "Yes, I heard about your marriage." Vex's voice was carefully neutral. "To a farmer, was it, Jake Murphy?" "Yes, I confess I was surprised." "After all we accomplished together, all the doors that were open." "To you, to choose such a simple life with a simple man." Vex paused. "But perhaps that is what you needed. A quiet husband who asks no questions and makes no demands." Lisa felt a flash of anger but kept her voice steady. "Jake is a good man. He makes me happy. I am sure he does in his way." Vex smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Simple pleasures for a simple life. There is honor in that, I suppose." The meeting with the colony officials was brief but troubling. Vex explained that Kralek's Empire forces had been seen near the border systems, conducting what appeared to be reconnaissance missions. The Zephyrian government was concerned about their intentions and wanted to ensure that human colonies like New Haven were prepared for potential threats. The Kraleks are not known for their diplomatic solutions, Vex said to the assembled group. If they move against the border worlds, it will be swift and brutal. We recommend that you begin preparations for possible evacuation. Colony Director Peterson, a gray-haired woman who had helped establish New Haven 15 years earlier, frowned at the news. We have some defensive capabilities, but nothing that could stand against a serious military assault. Most of our people are farmers and tradesmen. Precisely why evacuation may be your best option, Vex replied. The Zephyrian fleet will do what we can to protect human settlements, but our resources are limited. Lisa noticed that Jake had entered the room quietly during the briefing, taking a seat in the back without drawing attention to himself. He listened with the same careful attention he gave to everything, occasionally making notes on a small pad of paper. When the official meeting ended, Vex approached Jake with the sort of polite condescension that diplomatic training teaches. You must be the famous Jake Murphy. Lisa has told me about you. Jake stood and offered his hand in the human custom. Nice to meet you, Commander. Hope your visit goes well. Thank you. I understand you run a repair business here? Fixing farm equipment and such? That's right. Keep the machinery running, help folks when things break down. Honest work, Vex said, in the tone someone might use when speaking to a child. I imagine it keeps you busy. Busy enough. Jake's voice remained calm and friendly. Lisa mentioned you two used to work together. Sounds like it was important stuff. Oh yes, very important. Treaty negotiations, military coordination, cultural exchange programs. The sort of complex work that requires years of training and experience. Vex glanced at Lisa. But I am sure you have your own expertise. Growing vegetables, repairing motors, every society needs such people. Lisa watched Jake's face, but his expression remained unchanged. If he felt insulted by Vex's words, he showed no sign of it. Everyone contributes what they can, Jake said simply, later that evening. After Vex had returned to his ship, Lisa found Jake sitting on their front porch, looking out at the sunset over their fields. The air was warm and filled with the sound of insects beginning their nightly chorus. He was rude to you, Lisa said, settling into the chair beside him. Was he? Jake seemed genuinely surprised. Seemed polite enough to me. You know what I mean? The way he spoke to you, like you were somehow less than him. Jake was quiet for a moment, considering her words. Maybe he was just trying to understand. Why you chose this life, this place, me? He reached over and took her hand. Can't say I blame him for wondering. Still wonder about it myself sometimes. Lisa squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses from years of honest work. I chose you because you are exactly who you are. Kind, gentle, strong in ways that matter. I chose this life because it is real, Jake repeated, as if testing the word. Yeah, I suppose it is that. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that shone on the Zephyrian homeworld. On the Kralek's Empire, on all the complicated places Lisa had left behind. Here on New Haven, with Jake's quiet presence. Beside her, those distant worlds felt very far away indeed. Inside the house, the communication terminal chimed softly with an incoming message, but neither of them moved to answer it. Whatever news it brought could wait until morning. For now, there was just the peaceful evening, the sound of night settling over their small farm, and the knowledge that they had chosen each other and this simple life together. Jake squeezed her hand gently, and Lisa knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever threats Commander Vex had warned about, they would face them together. Her quiet husband might not have medals or titles, but he had something more valuable, the strength that comes from knowing who you are and being content with that knowledge. The stars grew brighter as the night deepened, and still they sat together. Two people from different worlds who had found something precious in the simple act of choosing each other. 3 days after Commander Vex's visit, The colony's early warning system detected ships at the edge of the solar system. Captain Roy Henderson, the colony's defense coordinator, called an emergency meeting at the community center. Lisa arrived. With Jake, who had closed his repair shop early to attend, the community center was packed with worried colonists. Farmers sat next to shopkeepers, families with children clustered near the back, and the few people with military backgrounds positioned themselves closer to the front. Captain Henderson stood at a makeshift podium, his weathered face showing the strain of command. "The ships are still too far out for detailed scans," Henderson began, "but they're not following any established trade routes or sending identification signals. Given what Commander Vex told us about Kralek's activity, we have to assume this could be a hostile force." A murmur of concern rippled through the crowd. Lisa noticed how Jake listened with complete focus, his usual relaxed posture replaced by something more alert. When Henderson opened the floor for questions, Jake raised his hand. "How many ships are we talking about, Captain?" Jake asked, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "At least 6, possibly more. They're maintaining formation, which suggests military discipline." Jake nodded slowly. "What about their approach vector? Are they coming straight in or taking a more cautious route?" Henderson looked surprised by the technical nature of the question. "They're using a standard military approach, actually. Staying in the system's shadow zones, avoiding our main sensor arrays. That suggests they know our defensive capabilities," Jake continued. "Or lack thereof. Have you considered moving the civilian population to the southern settlements? The terrain there would make any ground assault more difficult." Lisa stared at her husband. In 2 years of marriage, she had never heard him speak with such authority about military matters. Around them, other colonists were nodding as if Jake's suggestions made perfect sense. Captain Henderson studied Jake with new interest. "Those are good points, Mr. Murphy. You have military experience?" "Some," Jake replied quietly, then settled back in his chair as if the conversation was over. After the meeting, Lisa walked home with Jake in silence. The evening air felt different somehow, charged with the tension of unknown threats approaching their peaceful world. When they reached their farmhouse, Jake went directly to the barn where he kept his tools and equipment. "Jake," Lisa called, following him, "what you said back there about military tactics and defensive positions, how do you know those things?" Jake was rummaging through a storage cabinet, moving aside spare parts and farming supplies. "Pick things up over the years. Books, conversations with folks who've been around." "Books," Lisa repeated, watching him search for something specific. "What kind of books?" "History, mostly." "Military history." Jake pulled out a small metal case Lisa had never seen before. "Interesting to read about how people solve problems under pressure." Lisa moved closer, noting how Jake's hands moved with practiced efficiency as he opened the case. Inside were devices she didn't recognize, sleek and clearly more advanced than anything a simple farmer should own. "Jake, what is that?" "Communication equipment," he said simply, lifting out what looked like a military-grade transmitter. "In case we need to reach people outside the colony network." "Why would you have military communication equipment?" Jake paused, his hand still on the transmitter. "Sometimes it pays to be prepared for emergencies." Before Lisa could ask more questions, the device crackled to life. A voice came through, distorted but recognizable as human. "Reaper, this is Falcon. Are you receiving?" Jake looked at Lisa, something unreadable in his expression. "I need to." "Take this," he said quietly. "Reaper?" Lisa asked. "Who is calling you Reaper?" "It's just a call sign," Jake replied, but he was already adjusting the transmitter settings. "Give me a few minutes?" Lisa wanted to demand answers, but something in Jake's manner stopped her. Instead, she nodded and walked back to the house, her mind racing with questions. Call signs were military designations. The equipment in Jake's barn was clearly professional grade. And the way he had spoken at the meeting, the tactical knowledge he had displayed, suggested experience far beyond what any farmer should possess. She made tea and sat at their kitchen table, staring out at the barn where Jake remained in conversation with his mysterious contact. The quiet man she had married was revealing depths she had never suspected, and the timing was troubling. Just when their peaceful world faced its first real threat, Jake was suddenly displaying knowledge and resources that didn't match his simple farmer persona. When Jake finally returned to the house, his expression was troubled. "The ship's out there," he said without preamble. "They're definitely Kralex raiders. A friend of mine confirmed it." "A friend?" "Someone who keeps track of military movements in this sector." Jake sat down across from her, his hands clasped on the table. "The Kralex don't negotiate, Lisa. They take what they want and destroy what they can't use." "How does this friend know about Kralex movements?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "There are people who make it their business to know these things. People who've dealt with the Kralex before. People like you?" "People like me used to be," Jake said carefully. Lisa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What?" "Are you telling me, Jake?" "I'm telling you that we need to be ready. The colony's defenses won't hold against a serious Kralex assault. If they're really coming here, we need to prepare for the worst." "You're avoiding my question." Jake stood and walked to the window, looking out at their peaceful farm. "My past doesn't matter right now. What matters is keeping everyone safe." "Your past matters to me," Lisa said firmly. "I'm your wife, Jake. I have a right to know who I married." "You married a farmer who loves you," Jake replied without turning around. "That's still true, but it's not the whole truth, is it?" Jake's shoulders sagged slightly. "No, it's not the whole truth." The next morning, Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived at their farm, driving the colony's medical transport. Lisa had met Elena several times at community events, but the doctor had always seemed somewhat distant, professional, but not particularly warm. Today, however, Elena's manner was different. "Good morning, Jake," Elena said, and Lisa noticed how she almost seemed to stand at attention. "I came to discuss medical preparations for the emergency." "Come in, Doc," Jake replied, but Lisa caught something in his tone. A familiarity that suggested their relationship went beyond casual acquaintance. Over coffee, Elena outlined her concerns about treating wounded colonists if the Kralex attacked. She spoke directly to Jake, as if he were the person in charge of defensive planning rather than just another concerned citizen. "The trauma supplies you suggested last year proved very useful during the mining accident," Elena said. "Your recommendations for emergency medical protocols were spot on." "It's just common sense," Jake replied, but Lisa noticed how Elena's eyes showed a respect that seemed deeper than professional courtesy. When Elena prepared to leave, she shook hands with both of them. "Take care of yourself, sir," she said to Jake, the formal address slipping out before she could stop it. After Elena left, Lisa confronted Jake again. "She called you sir." "Why would the colony doctor call a farmer sir?" Jake sighed deeply. "Elena and I have worked together before on emergency preparedness. She knows I have some experience with crisis management." "What kind of experience?" "The kind that taught me how to keep people alive when things go wrong." That afternoon, Jake received another communication on his hidden transmitter. This conversation was longer, and when he emerged from the barn, his expression was grim. "They'll be here within 2 days," he announced. "My contact confirms that. The Kralex are planning a standard raid. They'll demand surrender, then take whatever they want regardless of the colony's response. What do we do?" Jake looked at her with eyes that seemed older than they had the day before. "We prepare. And we hope that help arrives before it's too late." "What kind of help?" "The kind that doesn't ask questions about the past," Jake said quietly. That evening, Lisa watched Jake work in his shop, supposedly repairing farm equipment, but actually doing something that looked more like weapons maintenance. His movements were precise, efficient, and clearly informed by extensive training. The gentle farmer she had married was still there, but underneath was someone else entirely. As night fell over New Haven, Lisa realized that the quiet life she had chosen was about to be tested in ways she had never imagined. And the man she thought she knew was preparing to reveal aspects of himself that he had kept hidden for reasons she was only beginning to understand. The stars overhead seemed different. Now, no longer peaceful lights in the darkness, but reminders of the hostile forces approaching their small world. And beside her, Jake Murphy continued his mysterious preparations. The farmer and the hidden soldier working together in ways that both impressed and frightened her, whatever was coming. Lisa knew that their simple life was about to change forever. The only question was whether the man she married would still be the same person when the truth finally emerged. The Kralex fleet arrived at dawn, their dark ships casting shadows across New Haven's morning sky. Lisa stood beside Jake on their porch, watching 6 massive vessels take position above the colony. The ships were angular and threatening, built for war rather than exploration. Their hulls scarred from countless battles, a transmission crackled through every communication device in the colony simultaneously. The voice that emerged was harsh and mechanical, translated from the Kralex language into standard human speech. Humans of New Haven, I am General Kane of the Kralex Empire. You have 24 hours to surrender unconditionally. Gather all valuable resources, technology, and able-bodied individuals at your main settlement. Resistance will result in total destruction. Compliance will result in swift occupation. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving an eerie silence across the colony. Lisa noticed how Jake's entire posture had changed during the broadcast. His shoulders were straighter, his eyes constantly scanning the sky, and his hands moved with the precise economy of someone accustomed to crisis situations. We need to get to the community center, Jake said quietly. Henderson will be calling another meeting. When they arrived, the building was already packed with frightened colonists. Children clung to their parents, elderly residents sat and worried. Clusters and the few people with any military background looked grim but determined. Captain Henderson stood at the front, his face showing the strain of impossible decisions. We all heard the transmission, Henderson began. Our defensive capabilities are limited. We have some personal weapons, basic shields around critical facilities, and a small security force. Against 6 Kralex warships, we're completely outmatched. A farmer named Bill Stevens raised his hand. What about evacuation? Can we get people out before they land? Not enough transport capacity, Henderson replied. Most of our ships are cargo haulers, not passenger vessels. We might get a few hundred people out, but not the whole colony. Lisa watched Jake during this exchange, noting how he listened with the intensity of someone making tactical calculations. When Henderson asked for suggestions, Jake stood up. The Kralex will expect either immediate surrender or panicked resistance, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. What they won't expect is organized defensive action. If we can make their initial assault costly enough, they might reconsider whether this colony is worth the effort. Henderson looked skeptical. Mr. Murphy, I appreciate the optimism, but we're talking about professional soldiers with superior equipment and training. That's true, Jake replied calmly. But they're also far from home, operating with limited resources and probably expecting an easy victory. Surprise and determination can level the playing field. A woman named Marie Collins, who ran the colony's engineering department, spoke up. Jake helped design our water treatment system last year. His suggestions for defensive positions during the winter storms were excellent. Maybe we should listen to what he has to say. Lisa stared at her husband, realizing how many colonists seemed to know about Jake's capabilities while she had remained unaware. Henderson studied Jake with new interest. What kind of defensive action are you suggesting? Jake moved to the front of the room and began sketching on the presentation board. His drawing showed the colony's layout from a tactical perspective, marking key positions and potential strong points with the confidence of someone who had studied such problems before. The Kralex will likely land here, at the main spaceport, then advance toward the administrative center and residential areas, Jake explained. We position teams here, here, and here to channel their advance into prepared positions. Use the terrain to our advantage, force them to fight on our terms rather than theirs. Captain Henderson studied the diagram. This is sophisticated tactical planning, Jake. Where did you learn to think like this? Books, Jake said simply, but his eyes met Henderson's with an intensity that suggested much more, and experience. What kind of experience? Jake was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling. With some internal decision? The kind that taught me how to make hard choices when people's lives are at stake. Before Henderson could press further, the community center's doors opened and Ben Parker walked in. Lisa had never seen the man before, but Jake's reaction was immediate and telling. Her husband's face went completely still as she saw his hands unconsciously move to a position that suggested he was reaching for weapons that weren't there. Ben Parker was clearly military, despite wearing civilian clothes. His bearing, his alert eyes, and the way he moved all marked him as a professional soldier. He was older than Jake, perhaps 50, with gray hair and scars that spoke of serious combat experience. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ben said, addressing the room but looking directly at Jake. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but time is short. I'm here to offer assistance with your Kralex problem." Henderson stepped forward. "Who are you? How did you get past the blockade?" "Let's just say I have experience with situations like this," Ben replied, still watching Jake. "And I have reason to believe that someone in this room has the expertise to coordinate an effective defense." The two men stared at each other across the crowded room. Lisa saw something pass between them, an understanding that excluded everyone else present. Finally, Ben spoke again. "Hello, Reaper. Been a while." The name hit the room like a physical blow. Lisa felt her breath catch as she realized that Ben's use of the call sign she had heard on Jake's transmitter was no coincidence. Around them, colonists looked confused, but Henderson's expression showed dawning recognition. "Reaper," Henderson repeated slowly. "I've heard that name before. Military circles back during the border wars?" Jake's shoulders sagged slightly, as if a weight he had been carrying was finally settling into place. "Hello, Ben. I was wondering when you'd turn up." "Couldn't let you have all the fun," Ben replied with a grim smile. "Besides, someone needs to keep you out of trouble." Lisa found her voice. "Jake, what is he talking about? Who is Reaper?" Jake looked at her, and she saw years of carefully hidden pain in his eyes. "Reaper was my call sign. A long time ago, when I was someone else." "You were never someone else," Ben said firmly. "You were always exactly who you are." "You just decided to be it somewhere quieter." Henderson stepped closer to Jake. "If you're who I think you are, then we might actually have a chance." The stories about Reaper's operations against the Kralex are legendary in military circles. "Stories get exaggerated," Jake said quietly. "Not these stories," Ben replied. 3 successful raids behind enemy lines. 17 prisoners rescued. From Kralex ships. An entire assault force stopped by a single squad under your command. Lisa stared at her husband, seeing him as if for the first time. The gentle farmer who made her coffee each morning, who hummed while working in his garden, who had never raised his voice in anger, was apparently a legendary military figure. "Jake," she said softly, "is this true?" Jake looked at her with eyes that held both love and terrible sadness. "It's true, but it's also the past. I retired from that life because I couldn't carry it anymore." "What happened?" Henderson asked. "I lost my entire unit in a Kralex ambush," Jake replied, his voice barely audible. "Good people died because I made the wrong call. I swore I'd never put anyone else at risk because of my decisions." Ben shook his head. "That ambush wasn't your fault, Jake. The intelligence was wrong. The enemy was better prepared than anyone knew. You saved more lives than you lost. Tell that to the families of the people who didn't come home." The room fell silent, everyone processing this revelation. Lisa felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Her quiet husband, the man who treated injured animals with gentle hands and never spoke harshly to anyone, was someone entirely different from what she had believed. "The question now," Ben continued, "is whether you're willing to be Reaper one more time. Because these people need you, and sitting in that farmhouse isn't going to save them." Jake looked around the room at the faces of his neighbors' people. He had helped with their problems, shared meals with, laughed with during community celebrations. Lisa saw the moment when his decision crystallized. "What do you need me to do?" he asked Ben. "Be who you've always been," Ben replied. "Lead." Jake nodded slowly, then turned to Captain Henderson. "I'll need complete tactical authority. No questions. No second-guessing. If you can't accept that, then we should evacuate whoever we can and hope for the best." Henderson studied Jake's face. perhaps seeing for the first time the steel beneath the quiet exterior. "Done. What are your orders?" As Jake began outlining his defensive plan, Lisa watched her husband transform before her eyes. His voice carried new authority, his movements became more decisive, and the farmer she had married revealed himself to be something far more complex and dangerous. The quiet man she loved was still there, but now she understood that his gentleness was not weakness but incredible strength under perfect control. And as the Kralek's threat grew closer, she realized she was about to discover just how much strength her husband had been hiding all along. Lisa watched her husband become someone else entirely as he took command of the colony's defense. Jake stood at the center of the community room, no longer the quiet farmer who spoke softly and avoided attention. His voice carried absolute authority. As he assigned positions and gave orders that people followed without question. "Marie, I need you to set up communications between all defensive positions," Jake said to the engineering chief. "Use the maintenance tunnels under the colony. The Kraleks will jam surface communications, but they won't know about the underground network." "Already on it," Marie replied, and Lisa noticed how the woman seemed energized by having clear direction. "What about power distribution?" "Redirect everything to essential systems only. Lights, basic life support, and defensive equipment. Make the colony look abandoned from the air." Ben Parker had brought equipment that Lisa was certain no civilian should possess. Advanced weapons, military-grade armor, and communication gear. That looked far superior to anything the colony normally had access to. As Jake examined the supplies, his movements showed familiarity with tools of war that contradicted everything she thought she knew about him. "How much time do we have?" Jake asked Ben. "Maybe 6 hours before they start landing troops. The Kraleks like to let fear build before they attack, but they won't wait longer than their deadline." Jake nodded, his hands already checking the action on a rifle that seemed to fit his grip perfectly. "That's enough time to get people into position and brief the team leaders." Lisa stepped closer to her husband, noting how he handled the weapon with casual expertise. "Jake, when did you learn to do this?" He looked at her and she saw years of carefully hidden pain in his eyes. "I've been doing this longer than I've been farming, Lisa. This is who I was before I met you. Before you retired. Before I ran away," Jake corrected quietly. "I came to New Haven to escape this life, not because I chose a better one." Ben overheard the conversation and approached them. "Don't listen to him, Lisa. Jake didn't run from anything. He made the hardest choice a soldier can make." "Which was?" "He chose to stop fighting," Ben explained. "After what happened to his unit, he could have requested another command, gone back into combat, spent his life seeking revenge against the Kraleks. Instead, he walked away from everything he knew to find peace." Jake was strapping on body armor that fit him like it had been made specifically for his frame. "Peace is a luxury, Ben. These people need a soldier, not a farmer." "They need both," Lisa said firmly. "The farmer cares about protecting them. The soldier knows how to do it." As the hours passed, Lisa watched Jake organize the colony's defense, with skills that spoke of extensive training and experience. He positioned volunteers at strategic points throughout the settlement, creating overlapping fields of fire and fallback positions that would force the Kraleks to fight for every building. The colonists responded to Jake's leadership with surprising confidence. People who had known him as a quiet neighbor suddenly seemed to understand that his gentle nature had always concealed something much more formidable. They followed his orders without hesitation, trusting an expertise they had sensed but never fully recognized. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived at the command post with medical supplies and a team of volunteers trained in emergency care. When she saw Jake in combat gear, her expression showed no surprise. "Medical teams are ready, Colonel," she said, and Lisa realized that Elena had known Jake's real identity all along. "Colonel?" Lisa asked. "Jake was the youngest full colonel in Special Forces history," Ben explained. "Before he became a farmer, he was the best tactical commander the human military had ever produced." Jake looked uncomfortable with the praise. "That was a different person, Ben." "No, it wasn't. You're the same man who taught farmers how to organize." their harvests efficiently and help design better irrigation systems. The same skills that make you a good farmer make you a good commander. As evening approached, the Kralek ships began moving into assault positions. Jake stood on the roof of the administrative building, watching the enemy formations through military binoculars that Ben had provided. Lisa joined him, noting how his entire bearing had changed. "They'll come in 3 waves, Jake said, his voice calm and analytical. "First wave will be shock troops, designed to break through our defenses and cause panic. Second wave will be the main assault force, moving to secure key positions. Third wave will be support units and commanders, following up to establish control." "How do you know their tactics so well?" "Because I've fought them before," Jake replied. "Many times." "The Kraleks are predictable because they're effective. They use the same strategies because those strategies usually work." "Usually?" Jake smiled, and for a moment Lisa saw something dangerous in his expression. "They're not used to facing organized resistance from civilian populations. Most colonies either surrender immediately or panic and scatter. They won't be prepared for coordinated defensive action." The first Kraleks transports began descending toward the spaceport just as Jake had predicted. Lisa watched through binoculars as armored soldiers disembarked, their movements showing military discipline and confidence. They looked like professionals who expected easy victory. "All teams, this is command," Jake spoke into his radio. "Enemy is landing at the primary site. Wait for my signal before engaging. Remember, we want to draw them into the prepared zones before we reveal our positions." Lisa listened to the calm professionalism in Jake's voice and realized she was seeing her husband's true nature for the first time. The gentle farmer had been real, but incomplete. This tactical commander was equally authentic, equally part of who Jake Murphy actually was. The Kraleks advance began exactly as Jake had anticipated. The alien soldiers moved in tight formations, sweeping through the outer areas of the colony. With the confidence of troops who had done this many times before. Their equipment was clearly superior to anything the colonists possessed, their coordination perfect. "They're following the main road," Ben observed, watching the enemy movement. "Just like you said they would." "They're not stupid," Jake replied. "But they're overconfident. Watch how they're not checking the side buildings carefully. They expect token resistance at best." When the Kraleks reached the first defensive position Jake had prepared, the ambush was devastating. Colonists who had been farmers and shopkeepers that morning opened fire with disciplined volleys that caught the alien soldiers completely off guard. The lead squad was cut down before they could take cover. "All teams, well done," Jake radioed. "Now execute fallback to position 2. Make them fight for every meter." Lisa watched her husband coordinate the battle with skills that spoke of years of combat experience. His predictions proved accurate as the Kraleks responded exactly as he had anticipated, calling for reinforcements and advancing more cautiously but still following predictable patterns. "How many battles have you fought like this?" Lisa asked. 2. "Many," Jake replied, then his expression softened as he looked at her. "But this one matters more than any of the others. Why?" "Because this time I'm not fighting for duty or orders or strategic objectives," Jake said quietly. "I'm fighting for home." The battle continued through the night with Jake's defensive plan working better than anyone had dared hope. The Kraleks were taking heavy casualties and making slow progress, their initial confidence replaced by frustration and anger. But Lisa could see that Jake was troubled despite their success. "What's wrong?" she asked during a brief lull in the fighting. "This is too easy," Jake replied. "The Kraleks I fought before were better than this. These troops are experienced, but they're not elite units." Ben nodded grimly. "I was thinking the same thing. General Kane has a reputation for being more cunning than this." "Which means what?" "It means this might be a test," Jake said, studying the enemy positions through his binoculars. "They're probing our defenses, learning our capabilities. The real attack hasn't started yet." As if summoned by Jake's words, a new transmission crackled through the communication system. General Kane's voice was cold with fury. Humans of New Haven, your resistance has been noted and will be punished accordingly. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or I will personally lead my elite forces to crush every building and kill every person in your pathetic settlement. Choose now. Jake lowered his binoculars and looked at Lisa with eyes that held both love and terrible determination. Now we find out what kind of man I really am, he said quietly. The real battle was about to begin, and Lisa realized that everything they had faced so far had been merely preparation for the storm that was coming. The hour passed like minutes. Jake stood at the command post watching as General Kane's elite forces began their assault on the colony. These soldiers moved differently than the first wave, with the deadly precision of troops who had conquered dozens of worlds. Their armor was heavier, their weapons more advanced, and their tactics showed the ruthless efficiency that had made the Krallex Empire feared across the galaxy. "They're targeting civilian areas?" Ben reported, his voice tight with anger. "Kane is trying to force you to abandon the defensive positions to protect non-combatants." Jake studied the enemy movements through his binoculars, his expression grim. He knows exactly what he's doing. The Krallex have files on me, probably know about my unit getting wiped out trying to protect civilians. Lisa watched her husband's face, seeing the internal struggle between his tactical mind and his protective instincts. "What do we do?" "We stick to the plan," Jake said firmly, though she could see the cost of that decision in his eyes. "If we break formation to chase after his raiders, he'll crush us in the open." The radio crackled with reports from around the colony. "Command, this is Team 3. Enemy forces are hitting the school district. We can see civilians trapped in the buildings." Jake's hand tightened on the radio, but his voice remained steady. "Team 3, maintain position." "Team 7, can you provide covering fire for civilian evacuation?" "Negative, Command. We're pinned down here." Lisa saw the moment when Jake made his choice. He handed the radio to Ben and picked up his rifle, checking the ammunition with movements that spoke of long practice. "Jake, what are you doing?" Ben asked. "What I should have done 5 years ago," Jake replied. "Leading from the front instead of sending other people to die for my mistakes. This is exactly what Kane wants. You leave the command post and the whole defense falls apart." Jake looked at Ben with eyes that held absolute certainty. "Then you'll hold it together until I get back." Before anyone could stop him, Jake was moving toward the stairwell. Lisa caught his arm as he passed. "Jake, don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built for the mistakes of the past." He stopped and turned to face her, his expression gentle despite the chaos around them. "Lisa, I didn't come to New Haven to hide from who I am. I came here to learn how to be the man you deserve to marry. The farmer and the soldier aren't different people. They're both me." "Then come back to me," Lisa said fiercely. "Both of you." Jake kissed her forehead softly. "I promise." Lisa watched from the command post window as Jake moved through the colony streets with the fluid grace of someone born for combat. He seemed to flow between buildings like water, appearing where the Krallex least expected him and disappearing before they could respond effectively. When he reached the trapped civilians, his movements became even more precise. "Watch this," Ben said quietly, handing Lisa his binoculars. "Your husband is about to show these aliens why humans don't make good victims." Through the enhanced optics, Lisa saw Jake coordinate a rescue operation that was part military precision and part improvised genius. He used his knowledge of the colony's infrastructure, built during his years as a farmer and repair specialist, to create escape routes the Krallex couldn't predict or follow. The school was surrounded by elite Krallex soldiers, but Jake approached from underground, using maintenance tunnels he had helped design. He emerged behind enemy lines and began systematically eliminating sentries with the quiet efficiency that had earned him his reputation. "How is he doing that?" Lisa asked, watching Jake move through enemy positions like a ghost. "Experience," Ben replied. Jake didn't become legendary because he was the strongest or fastest soldier. He became legendary because he thinks 3 moves ahead of everyone else. The civilian evacuation proceeded flawlessly under Jake's coordination. Families emerged from the school through routes that kept them hidden from Kralek sensors, guided by hand signals from a man who had studied every building in the colony during his years of peaceful residence. But General Kane was watching too. As Jake completed the rescue operation, the Kralek's commander's voice boomed across the colony through loudspeakers mounted on his command vehicle. "Colonel Murphy," Kane announced, using Jake's real rank, "I know you can hear me. Your reputation precedes you, but your tactics are predictable. You cannot save everyone, and you cannot defeat me." Jake's voice came back through the radio system, calm and controlled. "General Kane, I've heard about you too. They say you've never lost a battle." "That is correct?" "Neither had I," Jake replied, "until I met your people 5 years ago. I'm looking forward to settling that debt." Kane's laughter was harsh and mechanical. "You lost because you tried to protect the weak? Make the same mistake again, and I will crush you completely." "The difference is that now I'm not just protecting strangers," Jake said. "I'm protecting home." What followed was unlike any battle Lisa had ever witnessed or imagined. Jake moved through the colony with supernatural awareness, appearing wherever the Kralek's assault was strongest, turning their own tactics against them. With devastating effectiveness, the alien soldiers had expected to face frightened civilians and amateur defenders. Instead, they found themselves fighting a coordinated resistance led by someone who understood their methods better than they did themselves. Jake used the colony's infrastructure like a weapon, channeling enemy forces into prepared killing zones while protecting civilian areas with tactical brilliance. "He's not just fighting them," Ben observed. "He's teaching them that humans are more dangerous than they realized." The turning point came when Jake confronted General Kane directly. The Kralek's commander had advanced to the colony center, confident that his superior equipment and experience would overwhelm any human opposition. But Jake met him in the town square with nothing but standard colonial defense weapons and 30 years of accumulated skill. The duel was brief and decisive. Kane was physically stronger and better armored, but Jake fought with the combined knowledge of a career soldier and a man defending everything he loved. When the Kralek's general fell, his remaining forces lost their coordination and began retreating toward their ships. "All units, this is command," Ben radioed. "Enemy forces are in full retreat. Do not pursue beyond the spaceport perimeter." Lisa ran through the streets to find Jake sitting on the steps of the community center, his rifle resting across his knees. He looked tired but peaceful, as if some long-carried burden had finally been lifted from his shoulders. "It's over?" she asked, settling beside him. "For now," Jake replied. "Kane's death will make other Kralek's commanders think twice before attacking human colonies. Sometimes a demonstration of strength prevents more conflict than it causes." Around them, colonists emerged from their hiding places and defensive positions. Lisa noticed how they looked at Jake now, with a mixture of respect and understanding that hadn't been there before. He was still their neighbor, still the quiet man who fixed their equipment and helped with their problems. But now they knew the full depth of his capabilities. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached them, carrying medical supplies. "Anyone need attention?" "Just some scrapes," Jake replied. "Nothing serious," Elena smiled. "Good to have you back, Colonel." "It's still just Jake," he said gently. "Jake Murphy, farmer and occasional defender of this little corner of the galaxy." Commander Vex arrived 3 days later with a Zephyrian fleet, prepared to evacuate the colony or provide military assistance. Instead, he found a peaceful settlement going about its normal business, with wreckage from Kralek's ships being cleaned up by residents who seemed remarkably calm about their recent victory. "I don't understand," Vex said to Lisa. "The reports indicated a massive Kralek's assault. Where are the survivors? Where is the destruction?" "The survivors are everyone," Lisa replied. "And there's no destruction because we had good leadership." Vex looked around the colony, noting the subtle signs of recent battle, but also the atmosphere of normal life resuming. "Who led your defense?" Lisa pointed to Jake, who was working in his repair shop, helping a neighbor fix a damaged harvester. "My husband." "The farmer?" Vex asked in disbelief. The farmer, Lisa confirmed, and the soldier, and the man who chose to build something instead of just protecting it. That evening, Jake hung his rifle above their mantel, next to a picture of their wedding day. Lisa understood now that the weapon wasn't a reminder of violence, but a symbol of the choice to use strength in service of peace. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked. "Maybe," Jake said, taking her hand, "but not soon and not here." Word will spread that New Haven is protected by people who know how to fight for what they love. And what happens to us now? Jake smiled, the same gentle expression she had fallen in love with, but now deepened by complete honesty between them. "Now we go back to farming and living, and building the life we chose together." They sat on their porch as the stars came out, the same stars that shone on distant worlds where other battles might be fought. But here on New Haven, there was peace, protected by the quiet strength of a man who had learned that the greatest victory was knowing when to fight and when to simply tend his garden. Lisa rested her head on Jake's shoulder, finally understanding that she had married exactly the man she thought she had, just more completely than she had ever imagined possible.